area of expertise, and I chose consular work for my area of expertise. I served in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Iraq, France, and in Washington, D.C. When I was serving in D.C., it was as an advisor to our other visa officers serving at embassies around the world to ensure they're interpreting and applying visa laws and regulations correctly. It's just another way of saying I'm a former visa officer. I've conducted thousands of visa interviews, just as everybody on the Argo Visa team has. I've been consulting with Argo Visa for about 6 years now. I've helped over 1,000 clients prepare for their visa interview. And today's session is designed to let you all know kind of what the officer expectations are at a student visa interview, so you know how to prepare best going in. It's getting increasingly difficult. I think everybody's probably seen the news and the recent changes to a lot of visa policies. And so it's more important than ever to prepare for your visa interview.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. You have really very impressive background. We can't wait to hear what you have to say about the visa interview. Just a little bit about me. My name is Rachel. I'm an education consultant with CISI. So if you have any questions after today's info session, you can feel free to reach out to me or email or send us a WeChat if you have any questions. So let's see. It's already 8:05. I think we can get started if you're ready. Yeah, just if we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please wait until after. So yeah, please, Lisa, start us off with anything you have, and let me know when you need the slide change.
Yeah, sure. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to go through the slides pretty quickly so that we can save as much time for questions. I just want to cover the basics, the information that I think everybody can use, introduce our company, Argo Visa, a little bit, give some general tips, and then we can get to any questions that people have. So like I was saying earlier, Argo Visa is a team of former consular officers. I think that, if you were to go online and try to find somebody to help you with your visa application process, most likely you'll come across agents who know very little and oftentimes do more harm than good. You come across immigration attorneys, which are, really appropriate if you have a case that you need to prepare going forward, but they don't necessarily know what it's like to be a visa officer doing the interviews and what the visa officer is looking for from applicants as they prepare. You might also find some former visa officers out there willing to provide their services, but I think what's really unique at Argo Visa is that we are a team, and so we're able to share information with one another. We're able to keep each other updated on trends, news, policy changes, and because we have people who've served all around the world, we're able to kind of cross-share experience, and all of us are stronger in a better position to help because of that. You can go to the next slide where I have listed just some examples of people that are on our team. We have more consultants than this, but I kind of picked a few that might have experience of interest into this for this audience in particular. You'll see that we have officers that have served in Asia, Latin America, Africa, officers that speak fluent Mandarin, Spanish, Portuguese. We have officers that are, that have interviewed tons and tons and tons of visa applicants. And then we have other officers that might, be a little more focused on the communications coaching and ensuring that their clients are feeling really confident when they go into their visa interview. So all of our officers are really strong. All of our former officers are very strong, but we also have different strengths. And one of the things that we do at Argo Visa, should you come to us for our service, is we try to match you up with the consultant that we think is in the best position to help you, both in terms of previous experience and style. Okay, so you can move to the next slide and let's talk about why you might want to be careful about your visa interview. So even before the Trump administration came in, the second Trump administration, that is, you can see that the trends for student visa approval was not going in the right direction. It was getting the risk of being refused a student visa has only gone up. The State Department doesn't publish numbers kind of in real time. They publish the refusal rates from the years before. So we know in 2024 that the refusal rate was roughly 40%. And we feel from speaking to our clients, talking to people who have applied for visas that normally would have been very approvable, being refused and coming to us for help, we feel quite confident that these visa refusal rates are going up this year increasingly, and maybe 50% or more, depending on the country that you're applying in. The numbers on this graph are worldwide. So it's, every student around the world who's applied for a student visa to come to the US combined. But visa approval or refusal rates do really vary by country. And it's because depending on the economic trends of a particular country, it can be easier or harder to demonstrate that you qualify for a student visa. Go to the next slide. Okay, so some recent things that we've seen in 2025 that are making it harder for people. Well, just as of this past weekend, there is a new rule that you have to apply in your home country. That means you need to apply for a visa either where you are residing and provide proof that you reside there, or in your home country, which is the country of your nationality. Visa fees are going up. Social media vetting is now, it was always a potential, but is now required before any student visa or exchange visitor visa is issued. That means if an officer thinks that you're qualified for a student visa and wants to issue the visa, they still have to put you through social media vetting in order to issue that visa. And what's a little bit concerning about the social media vetting requirement is that the guidelines are really vague. We've seen the guidance that was given to consular officers that they're supposed to follow when determining if somebody is approvable or not after the vetting. And it's very general, very open to interpretation, and is along the lines of basically any sentiment expressed online that might be construed as anti-American, like US foreign policy. Anybody who kind of seems like they might be a troublemaker could be a reason why a student visa could now get refused. And that wasn't the case before. The other thing to know is for people who already have a student visa, if they go to the US and they get arrested or have any interactions with law enforcement, this could be a reason to refuse your visa. You may have heard over the summer that there were mass student visa revocations. And what we figured out was that anybody who had any interaction with law enforcement, even if they weren't convicted, even if charges were never filed, even if everything was dismissed and they were found innocent, their visas were revoked. And even more concerning is that when they went home to their home country and reapplied for the visa, my consular colleagues were refusing these visas again, even where there weren't actual charges filed. So whereas it used to be you were innocent until proven guilty when it came to crimes, now basically just having been arrested is reason enough to revoke somebody's visa or to refuse somebody's visa. So that's a change that we've seen in 2025 as well. The type of school also matters. When I was being trained as a visa officer, we were taught not to judge the school, that we were looking for applicants that were credible students. And credible students could be ones that were going to community college. They could be going for English classes. As long as their genuine intention was to study in the US, that's what we were supposed to be focused on. they didn't have to be the best student. They just had to be a real student. But now we're seeing some trends where certain Ivy League schools seem to be getting more scrutiny than others. And I do feel like, anecdotally speaking, it is getting harder for people to qualify for a student visa if they're going to a community college, an English as a second language program. And just to talk a little bit specifically about day one CPT programs, you know, there's there's um, there's nothing in any of our guidelines for visa officers that say that they should scrutinize people who are going to day one CPT programs more. In fact, when I was a visa officer, I had never even heard of the term day one CPT program. But because we are looking for students whose primary purpose for being in the US is to study, I do think that if you go to a day one CPT program, you have to be more prepared to explain why that has an educational value for you, why that work experience is a part of your larger educational plan and program, and how it's going to benefit you in the workplace when you return to your home country. Lastly, another change in 2025 that hasn't happened yet, but there's a lot of buzz about because it will create a lot of administrative difficulties, and that might be an understatement, is the end to duration of status. So up until now, if you were approved your student visa, you could go to the US on your student visa, and that student visa is valid for as long as you are in school. That means you could go from a bachelor's degree program to a master's degree program to a PhD program as long as you were enrolled full-time in school, following all of the requirements. You would never be accruing what's called unlawful presence. The problem with unlawful presence is if you accrue too much of it, you could get barred from returning to the US in the future. The proposal that they've put forward looks to put a fixed date on the student visa, so an expiration date of after 4 years, for example, which means that if you don't finish in 4 years and you need an extra fifth year to get your bachelor's degree, you would have to go for a visa interview, or at a minimum, apply for an extension of your student visa and presumably justify why you need that additional year. We don't know a lot about this proposal yet because it is still a proposal, so we don't know what it'll look like in the end if and when it's finalized. The other thing that this proposal talks about is limiting students' abilities to change their program the very first year that they enter. And I think that what they're trying to avoid here is people, going to school and then after just a month or two changing their program to one that might be more conducive for work, or isn't quite as education oriented. And so they're trying to avoid that by now putting some limits on when you can change your program. Okay, so what do all the changes mean for somebody who's applying for a student visa today? A lot of this is out of an applicant's control, and probably you shouldn't spend too much time stressing about it or reading everything you can about it. Just know that the student visa interview now is going to take a little more planning. You'll want to apply earlier rather than later. You want to be prepared for your interview because if you get refused, it's not so easy to turn around and just reapply again. Sometimes you might have to wait an entire academic year before you get a second chance to demonstrate your qualifications at your student visa interview. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. All right, so sorry, I kind of. Okay, so sorry, the screen's not big enough for me to actually read what I've written. So I'm looking at my own presentation here. Okay, so for the social media vetting, we get a lot of questions on this. So I just put in an additional slide. When you apply for your student visa, you have to list all your handles for the last 5 years. That means all of your social media accounts. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that's your TikTok, everything. Don't try to hide anything because it would be whatever you're trying to hide, chances are not as bad as being caught trying to hide it. Um, there's a lot of advice right now to clean up your social media, to delete posts and things like that. You could do that. I would do it with caution, though, because there is technology out there that can find the footprint even after you've deleted something. We don't know that the State Department has deployed that technology yet, but they could. So I really wouldn't clean up my social media unless I thought it could very easily be misinterpreted. What the officers are looking for is basically, do I think this person is coming to the US primarily to study, or are they coming to the US to be a troublemaker, to participate and protest, to make the American government look bad in some sort of way? So the less controversial your social media posts are, the better. So that's more or less what they're looking for. I'm sorry, I don't have something more concrete for you, but that's what consular officers are given for guidance. Bye. Okay, so what are the top challenges at your student visa interview? You basically need to demonstrate three things when you go in for your student visa interview: that you're a credible student, meaning you're really going to study, and that is the primary purpose for going. It can't be incidental to working or incidental to making a political statement, which is what they are looking for on the social media vetting. Ties to your home country that are going to compel you to return after your course of study. Usually, economic reasons are the strongest reasons for returning to one's home country, especially for younger students who aren't yet married with children and things like that. And third, that it all makes financial sense. That's essentially how visa officers interpret all the guidance that they get, all the regulations that they follow. Do I think this person's really going to study? Do I think they're coming home after they finish studying? And does it financially make sense? So these seem like pretty easy things to demonstrate if you are a real student coming to the US temporarily for your educational program. So what are the challenges? Well, the challenges are that in a visa interview, unlike in the justice system in the US, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And by that we mean you are guilty of being an intending immigrant, somebody who wants to come to the US and stay, to work, to live, until you prove otherwise. That means you can't wait for the consular officer to ask you, are you going home to your home country? They're making that judgment based on every answer you give to every question they ask, even if it doesn't seem relevant to you. Starting with the question, why do you want to study in the US? They're looking for signs, clues that your purpose for studying in the US is going to serve you in your home country and that you're going to return. So if you don't prepare your answers to show that you meet these requirements, just know the officer's baseline is to assume that you do not meet the requirements. Communication skills, culture, these are also challenges for visa applicants. In a lot of cultures, talking to a government official means not speaking until you're spoken to, not saying anything more other than what's asked in the question, perhaps being a bit reluctant to make eye contact or to talk to a government official as an equal. But when you go in for your visa interview, making eye contact, having confidence in your answers, expressing yourself in a concrete manner, and proactively giving your narrative for why you want to study in the US, why you're definitely coming back to your home country, why this is a good investment for you and your family to make, you stand a really decent chance of the officer assuming the worst about you and refusing you. So, one of the things that we really focus on at Argo Visa when our clients come to get help is the mock interview. The mock interview serves two purposes. First, it gives the client an opportunity to see what it feels like to be a visa applicant, what kinds of questions they're going to be asked, how they're going to be asked, how many questions they're going to be asked, what the tone of the scenario will be like. Well, also too, it gives us an opportunity to give feedback to our clients about how they're coming across to us. And we give them tips on how to be more confident, how to be more proactive, how to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward so that the visa officer reads that applicant as being a qualified one. Next slide.
Am I on the right slide or sorry,
Yes, you are on the right slide. I just kind of started talking about the slide
yeah, that's okay.
before we moved on to it. So how do you overcome the challenges? Understand what the visa officer is looking for. Whether it's a student visa, a J visa, an M visa, know what the requirements are. Think about your own situation and how you meet those requirements. Don't memorize anything, be conversational, but prepare and practice. Be ready to give kind of like your headlines, know how to take advantage of questions when they're asked of you, so that you can show the officer right away that you meet the qualifications for the visa. Visa officer, depending on the country they're serving in, interviews anywhere between 80 and 150 people a day. In some countries, the fraud rates are really high and they're getting lied to all day, every day. So the officer really just wants to make a decision as quickly as possible. And they're usually going off of their gut feeling. So, the better you present yourself, the earlier you present the best of yourself in the interview, the better for you. And the only way to do that is to know what you want to say and prepare and practice that. Next screen. Okay, so understanding the requirements for the student visa. I kind of already went over this. Is the applicant a credible student? Does it all make financial sense? And will the student return to their home country? Let me say something here about day one CPT and financial plans. So a lot of students think that the requirement for the student visa is to demonstrate that they have enough to pay for tuition and living expenses in the US. And that certainly is something that the officer is looking for, but it's not their job to make sure that universities are going to get the money, that they're promised when a student enrolls. Okay, they're not like an accountant for the university and making sure like, oh, if tuition is $50,000 that you have $50,001 in your bank account. That's really not what it's about for visa officers. They're asking themselves, okay, if it's $50,000 a year and you're going for 4 years, that's $200,000 that you're investing in your education. Do I think somebody who's coming back to their home country would invest this amount of money? Does it make financial sense? And day one CPT can cut both ways in that sense, because on the one hand, if you're working while you're in school, that definitely brings the cost down and it can really help you demonstrate that this makes financial sense for you, because the costs are brought down. The way it can sometimes complicate your case, though, is if the officer thinks the true motivation is for you to go to the US to make money, save money, and bring it home. So you have to be really clear about the role that the CPT plays in your educational plan, how it's going to be valuable for your career in your home country when you return. Because if you don't explain that, the assumption is that that CPT work is a springboard for you to have a career in the US, to apply for an H-1B, stay, and live in the US, which means you don't overcome immigrant intent, meaning they don't think you're going to come home to your home country and that you're not a credible student. So this is what I mean when I say you have to know the requirements. You have to know how your situation meets those requirements. And if you have any weaknesses, how you can explain the plan to the officer in a way that that weakness can actually become a strength. And I think day one CPT is a good example of that. Next screen. Next slide. Thanks. Okay, so knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Some strengths that you should definitely be talking about in your student visa interview is if you have good economic opportunities in your home country as a result of this education that you're about to undertake in the US. And that means having a really clear vision and plan of what it is you want to do. I like to advise all my clients when they're asked that first question, why do you want to study in the US, to start with what they want to do in their home country. Well, I'm looking to become an IT professional at the mid to senior level here in Chennai, and this program in the US will open that door for me. Okay, so even before saying why they want to study in the US, they're explaining what their plan and vision is for themselves in their home country. Being accepted to a good university certainly helps, because then you don't really have to spend too much time demonstrating you're a credible student. It's more about demonstrating that you're going to come home after that experience. And of course, previous international travel that indicates to the officer that you're of financial means. So you're not you're less likely to be economically driven or tempted to stay in the United States. Some common weaknesses that we see that definitely should be addressed in your interview, or you should be ready to address in your interview, is if you have family members in the US, especially siblings who are currently studying in the US or studied in the US and then stayed on an H-1B or got married and didn't come home. It's really easy for the officer to assume that you're going to do the same thing. Oh, this worked out well for your older brother or sister, so that's why you're doing it now. Doesn't mean it's impossible for you to qualify for a student visa if you have a sibling studying in the US, but you have to be ready to explain either what their plan is if they are coming back, or how you're different from your sibling if your sibling didn't come back. And then lastly, if you have a lack of commitment to returning to your home country, or more commonly, don't mention anything about your plans for after school in your home country, that's a red flag for the officer and a possible reason to refuse you. Okay, next slide. All right, so how does Argo Visa help? Well, we give advice like the kind of advice I've given today, only we tailor it to your specific situation. So we have 30-minute, 45-minute, and 60-minute consultations. And in the 30-minute, we just, we learn a little bit about you. We tell you what we think your strengths and weaknesses are, and perhaps what your approach going into the interview should be. But I think the real value is in our 45-minute and 60-minute consultations, because in those we have time for a mock interview. And it's in the mock interview that you get to test out the strategy that we've provided to you, or the approach that we've given to you, and see how it feels. It's kind of like clothes. You get to try it on, see how it feels. We give you our feedback, what's working, what's not working, and some very specific examples of how to improve. Our service is especially valuable if you've already been refused, but these days, like I said before, because wait times are so long, I think that even people who feel fairly confident that they're qualified, that are going for their visa interview for the first time, probably should invest in some professional help in preparing for their interview, because the stakes are too high. I mean, it used to be you could apply for a student visa, and if you got refused, you could sign up again and apply a second time, maybe feel a little more confident now that you know what to expect. Maybe you've had some help from Argo and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go back, and you could apply for your visa a second time around. But now with backlogs and wait times becoming longer and longer, depending on where you're applying, there's a really good chance that you only get one shot. And if you're refused, you'll have to defer your program to the next year. And it's just not worth it. It's better to be prepared that first time. It's also harder to get your visa approved if you've also been refused, because the consular officer that interviews you that second, third, or fourth time is now in a position of having to disagree with their colleagues who refused you before if they want to approve you. So if you're somebody that's like on the fence, like, you sound pretty good to me, like, I would issue you. Oh, but I see my colleague has refused you, and you know what? I'm not feeling so sure about you, so I'm just gonna refuse you too, because that's what my colleague did, and I don't want to fight an uphill battle. So definitely your best shot at getting approved a visa is that very first time you go in for a visa interview. Next screen. Okay, I won't harp on too much about the mock interview practice. But I think the thing here to know is the way to prepare your answers is not to write out the perfect answer like a script and memorize it. There's a couple things wrong with that strategy. The first is if you give a memorized, overly prepared response, the officer's going to know it, and they're not going to find you credible or authentic because they'll wonder, why would a credible student need to memorize their answers about why they want to study in the US, right? So first of all, it hurts your authenticity.
Ele feina
Secondly,
for fake.
Vabbè,
Ele feina for fake.
okay, somebody has their, could you mute your microphone? Yeah. Okay. So secondly, you know, by giving a prepared and memorized answer, you're just tempting the officer to throw you a curveball, to ask you a question that you weren't prepared for, to throw you off your script because they want to see who you really are. An officer is not going to issue a visa to somebody unless they feel like they have a sense of who they're issuing that visa to. So if you come in with a practice perfect veneer, they'll do everything they can to break through it. Or worse, they won't even bother to try and they'll just refuse you. So the better way to prepare is to know what the officer is looking for, know what you want to say, and practice it in different ways. And that's what we do in our mock interview. Okay, so we can move on to frequently asked questions. We have about 20 minutes left. I do have some frequently asked questions that were provided to me ahead of time, but before we do that, let me ask if anybody has any questions based on what I've said so far. I see a lot in the chat. I'm not sure if there's questions in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Before we jump to the question, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It was very professional and comprehensive. I personally definitely learned a lot. And we also have CISI also has a partnership with Argo Visa. So if you wanna anybody in the chat or the meeting wanna contact us, we will have like a 20% off code for mock interviews with Argo Visa. So please feel free to reach out. Yeah, let's get to some of the questions in the chat. Right now, I think I have a few. The first one was from Jesse Young. What if we delete the whole social media account? Will it help?
I think I wouldn't recommend deleting everything because then that just raises red flags, especially if you're a young person. I mean, maybe if you're like, I don't know, 65-year-old grandma and you're applying for a tourist visa to, you know, visit grandchildren in the US, okay, we're not going to be surprised that that person doesn't have, you know, a big social media presence. But for your average student, if you don't have any social media presence, then they're going to know that you wiped your social media clean. And I think that's just going to raise more questions. Chances are, if you're an average student who posts average things online, you're not going to be refused your visa based on what's on your social media. I mean, if you've, you know, posted funny memes or even, you know, embarrassing videos of yourself, like the visa officer doesn't care. They're not there to judge, you know, whether your dating profile looks good or not, or silly, right? What they're looking for are expressions, political expressions that demonstrate that you might be anti-American or you know, likely to criticize the current administration or criticize U.S. foreign policy around the world. So if you've made like very controversial political statements, then, you know, then yeah, maybe it's worth thinking about deleting those posts. But I wouldn't wipe everything clean just to be like, oh, nothing to see here, unless you really are worried about it. And that's something that we can talk to you about during a consultation. We can take a look at your social media and give you our educated guess as to whether or not this is going to be an issue for you or not.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good question. And I see another good question in the chat. So which matters more in a visa interview, the officer's review of my paper documents or the attention they gave to my spoken interview answers?
Thank you so much for this question. This is a really good question, and I should probably put a slide in my presentation about this because documents do not matter. The officer does not. We are trained not to look at documents. At some embassies, as we walk to work, we pass by people with stalls selling documents for the embassy for like $10. So no, the documents don't matter. Still bring all your documents, your financial statements, for example. I mean, any academic records. So that way, when you're speaking, you can say, hey, you know what? I was an A+ student in high school. I've always been really interested in journalism. I've brought all my academic records here if you'd like to see it. Now, I could almost guarantee you the officer is going to say, no, thank you. But the fact that you have it there, ready to back up what you say, does give you a little more credibility. But if you just walk in and shove your papers, your academic transcripts through the window in hopes that your documents speak for itself, you will fail the visa interview. The US government doesn't make you go through this really costly interview process for nothing, right? Like if they thought that you could qualify based on documents alone, they would do it like the UK and Australia, where you just mail in a bunch of documents and they make a decision and send it back. Like that'd be cheaper and easier for everybody. But the US government believes that a human being talking to you is a better judge of your credibility than documents.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you. I have a few more questions in the chat. And before we go to the next question, I just want to advise the students in the chat. Like if you have a more your a case-based question or your like a very personal question, I would recommend leaving those questions for like a one-on-one or a mock interview or consulting with CSI. So next question we have is it's more like a broader question, I guess. What are the risks of F1 renewal on day one CPT when my current F1 expires? Would you say
So
there's yeah.
it depends. So like if you currently are an F1 and you finished like a bachelor's degree, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I guess the person's trying to say like if they're trying to leave the country and renew their F1 visa, but they're having the F1 visa through a day one CPT university, would there be any risk?
Well, as of right now, you don't have to renew your F1 visa. If you're going from if you're going for a bachelor's program into a master's program, and that master program is a day one CPT, you don't have to renew your student visa. But I guess if if there's been a gap, like if you graduated and now you're returned back home and you need to reapply for a new F1 visa for a new program, I think, like I said, about the day one CPT, you just have to explain why you've chosen this as an educational path. And the
Mm-hmm.
emphasis really has to be on how the experience broadens your education. And then, most importantly, that it's not about working in the US, it's about gaining that US experience because it's going to benefit you in your local economy. So
Yeah.
if you're applying from China, for example, explaining why working, in the film industry in Hollywood is going to benefit you when you return to Beijing and work at the film industry in Beijing, why that experience is valuable, so that it's about the experience. It's not about the salary or, the hourly wage that you make getting that experience.
Yeah, I think just a little bit more background information I was getting from my colleague. Usually for students who are going through the day one CPT process, they already have a master's degree. So I guess that's why they're concerned if they want to leave the country and then come back and then their previous master F1 visa is already expired and they need to leave the country for some reason. And then when they come back, they have another visa interview with the uh, visa officer, but the school,
For a second master's program
yes.
or taking a break during their first master's program.
I think usually it's a second master's program.
So the thing with the second master's program, regardless of the day one CPT component, is very few Americans go for a second master's degree. We like going up, up, up. So after a master's degree, the natural progression would then be a PhD. And I think I saw in the chat, somebody asked, is it better to go for a PhD than a second master's degree? I would say yes, unless you're changing your career, right? It's okay to go for a second master's degree. If it was not okay, we would just have a regulation saying no second master's degree students, right? Like that would be easy. The reason why we don't say that and we have the interview is because we're giving people the chance to explain why would you go for a second master's degree. If you're changing careers, then that makes sense. Oh, hey, you know what? I have a master's degree in film. I came back to Beijing. I didn't really find the jobs that I was hoping for. So now I'm doing what my mom told me to do all along, and I'm going for an IT, master's degree in IT, and that's why I'm going for my second master's. Okay, I get that. I understand that. Or maybe, hey, I got my first master's degree 20 years ago. A lot has changed. I want to, update my knowledge. It's going to improve my chances in the job market here in China. So I'm going for my second master's degree. Okay, I buy that. But if it's just, I got an IT degree in business, and now I got a master's degree in business. Now I want to get a second master's degree in accounting. That doesn't make sense to me. That's a lot of money for not a big value added. And so then I would maybe more look at the PhD program. Whether it's a second master's degree, a PhD program, or a day one CPT program, you just have to give the narrative of why this makes sense for your education, why it makes sense financially, and tie it all back to your goals that you're pursuing in your home country. There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong path. There's just a path that doesn't make sense at first glance and a lack of explanation. That's why people get refused.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very well explained. That's what we also always tell our students when they ask us about like visa interviews, about like second master. They're so nervous about like being questioned about the second master. We also always tell them like as long as you can explain yourself like to the reason why you're getting the second master, whether it's a career change, or you want to update your knowledge, just like you said, I believe the visa officer will give you their judgment based on the explanation you gave.
Yeah, and so if for example somebody was going for a second master's, came to Argo Visa for a consultation, I would ask the client like, okay, so why are you going for the second master's degree? What do you want to do? How is this going to help you potentially? Okay, let's flesh that out a bit. All right, let's practice the answer I'm going to ask you, or I'm going to ask you the typical visa questions, which don't necessarily have that direct question, why are you going for a second master's degree, which would give you the chance to explain, okay, so what if the first question is why are you going to the US to study? How do you just go ahead and proactively say, well, I graduated with a master's degree 10 years ago. A lot has changed in finance since that time. I'm really interested in, cryptocurrency and this wave of, decentralized finance. I'm going to get a second master's degree so that I can update my knowledge base, which is, very much in high demand in my home country. So that's the kind of tailoring that we do once we learn a little bit more about the client and their goals.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can go to the prepared questions for right now because I see if we have more questions about the visa interview process, we will definitely bring it up to Lisa's attention. Right now, it's more about like visa in general. So maybe we can go to the prepared question first. So the first question is actually very interesting that my colleague and I prepared. So President Trump stated that on August 25th, he stated that the U.S. welcomes Chinese students and plans to allow 600,000 to study at American universities. So, do visa officers consider such statements when evaluating F1 visa applications?
Yes and no. So visa officers follow regulations in what we call the FAM, the Foreign Affairs Manual. So that's where we get the requirements, like you need to demonstrate you're a credible student, you need to, be entering before your program start date, you need to, you need to have ties to your home country, and it all makes financial sense. But in addition to that, they also get guidance from Washington, from the Bureau of Consular Affairs. And that's where we got the guidance for like the social media vetting, like, hey, this is what you should be looking for. It's not a regulation, but it is a policy or guidance that officers need to follow. There hasn't been, as far as we know, any formalized guidance from either the Bureau of Consular Affairs, certainly not in the Foreign Affairs Manual, stating that we need to allow in up to 600,000 Chinese students. I think it's highly unlikely that anything will ever come because we don't do quotas. So when visa officers determine if somebody is credible or not, they do it in a vacuum without consideration of how many students have already been approved that year or how, so it's both good and bad, right? It's not like, oh, it's September now. We were only going to let in 100,000 students and we're at, 995. So like, we only get to say yes to a few more and now it's more difficult. No, we don't look at it like that at all. And likewise, Trump can say, oh, we're going to let in 600,000, but there's no way that because of security reasons, they could put any pressure on visa officers to say, oh, you need to let in more and more and more. That being said, there is a culture, right? Like up until recently, it was relatively easier to get a student visa than other types of visa because there was a culture of wanting to support the international exchange of ideas. There was a sense that American universities benefit from having foreign students study there, and that foreign students, they bring home American culture and values when they complete their education in the US. Oftentimes, our best interlocutors on a political level were people who became, to be in high levels of position after studying in the US. So yes, it could influence officers in the sense that like things could feel a little more relaxed about issuing students versus more pressure to not issue. But it wouldn't ever be like, oh, they're going to let in 600,000, only 300,000 have applied. I'm good to go. Like I wouldn't count on that at all. Not even a little bit.
Thank you. We have a lot of more questions, but I'm just going to go through the most important one. So in the new policy, it states that all non-immigrant visa applicants should schedule their visa interview in their country or nationality of residence. So what do you think the should mean in this context? Like, is it compulsory to schedule the interview in the applicant's country or nationality of residence, or is there a flexibility? Like how, and would this change the interview outcome?
Okay, so yes, it would change the interview outcome. So I also focused on this word should when the guidance came out. In some places it says must, and in some places it says should. And I think the reason why they've left that should in there is to leave a little bit of wiggle room for really rare extreme cases. So I think for your average student, you must apply in your home country or your country of residence. Now, if you are in a terrible accident and you need to reapply for your visa to go, for medical treatment and you don't happen to be in your home country, then maybe, you could apply in the country that you're at. Even now, it's post-dependent. So a consulate or an embassy could say, sorry, we don't take third country nationals. Or we do take third country nationals, but you're on a different waiting list. And so the wait times are a lot longer for you than others. So it depends on their workload, their capacity there at the embassy or consulate. So I suspect the should is left in there so that there's a little bit of wiggle room should they need it, so that it's not a hard and fast rule. But for the vast majority of visa applicants, they do have to apply in their home country. And you know what? In most cases, you want to be applying in your home country anyway. So I understand that in some countries, the wait time is really long, but an officer sat in Ghana, Africa, is not going to be as comfortable issuing a visa to a Chinese student as a consular officer that sat in Beijing. An officer that sat in Beijing, they know the culture, they know the economics, they know what red flags to look for, they know what a typical visa looks at, or a typical student looks and sounds like. But in Ghana, they don't know anything about Chinese students. And what's more is if they've already been refused in China, they certainly aren't going to think that their judgment in Ghana is better than that officer's judgment in Beijing. So we almost always recommend that people apply in their home country anyway. There are some rare cases where, you know, if you're applying for a really specialized kind of visa that's rare, then sometimes you know, maybe if you're, you know, if you're Ghanaian and you're maybe, you know, in Ghana, they don't do that kind of visa very often, then we might recommend, oh, hey, you know, go try London because there's a deep bench there. There's layers and layers of supervision and they know how to handle all these cases properly. When you get like a smaller consulate or post, and I don't think they have any in China, they're all big, you know, that then sometimes you're left up to the mercy of like one or two officers who develop a reputation, and then, you know, you might be justified in applying in a nearby country, but generally you should be applying in your home country anyway.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So it's more related to the day one CPT programs. So just like in the chat box, I guess we can combine the questions together. Someone asked, how can we tell the interviewer that we're working? How can we justify the working nature of the day one CPT programs? And would like the work study program, would it affect how visa interviews, how visa officers evaluate this applicant's intent to study? And also like there's, you know, there's some I guess schools that are more famous for providing day one CPT programs are on. Is there like a list for officers that these schools you might like need to keep an eye on these students? Yeah.
So yes, the school that you apply to does influence the officer's decision. The harder a school is to get into, the better academic record you need to get into a school, the easier it is for the officer to believe that you're a credible student because you were able to pass stringent, you know, requirements to get into that school. There is not a list of schools that officers don't issue visas for unless that school has been associated with some kind of fraud or visa fraud. Okay, so there are some schools out there that perhaps you know, haven't yet been found to be fraudulent, and charges haven't yet been filed, you know, by law enforcement authorities, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And so if there's been a lot of evidence of fraud associated with a particular school, then there is a chance that the officer is going to, you know, just automatically refuse students attending that school. But the vast majority of schools don't fall under that umbrella. But even so, it can be harder to get a visa issued if it is a really easy school to get into and it's day one CPT. Why? Because the number one requirement is that you are a credible student going to the US primarily to study. And if the officer thinks you're going to the US primarily to work, they're not going to think that you qualify for the visa, which is why the solution is to explain why this CPT experience helps you educationally. What is it that you're going to learn from this work experience that you're embarking on? Why did you choose a day one CPT school rather than one where you're just learning things from a textbook? There's all kinds of good reasons from an educational perspective why you would want work experience. I mean, that's why we offer OPT and CPT, right? For students in the US. So why would you want to do it from day one? I mean, I could help you extrapolate reasons, but I'd have to know what program you're going for, what are your career goals, what are the difference between the work experience that you would get in the US versus in your home country in the same field. So you want to be specific and you want to be concrete about why this work experience benefits you educationally and professionally in your home country. So talk about it as an education in the US, but then how it's going to help you professionally when you return, because that's how it all makes financial sense, which is tying in all three of the requirements, right? Credible student, returning to their home country, makes financial sense. This is what we specialize in at Argo Visa, is helping you put it all together. You might be able to identify, oh, these are my strengths or these are my weaknesses, but how do you put it all together in a narrative that is persuasive and compelling? That's what we love helping people do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. Those are very good questions to think about when it comes to visa interviews. And thank you so much for today's very comprehensive info session. I personally definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody in the chat in the meeting have gained some knowledge. So yeah, just a quick note: if you're thinking about going for a visa interview and you would like to have the help of former professional U.S. visa officers help to do like a mock interview, please feel free to reach Argo Visa or CSI. We also provide a 20% off code for the mock interview. So yes, let us know if you have any more questions. And I think that concludes our info session today. Thank you so much, Lisa.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good luck,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.